Unemployment and what's next? That's a great question. Right now, I really am just hoping for an IT role. I've been doing what I can to find a help desk IT position, and honestly, I don't really know how successful I'm going to be at this moment in time. Not that I don't believe that I can get the role that I'm looking for, but it just seems that it's extremely difficult to land something that I've actually been looking for some time. Within my last role, I was doing a lot of audiovisual work. So the best way to explain this would be I set up events, and within that environment, it showed me that I was dealing with a lot of like end user things. So helping people set up like Wi-Fi, set up their booths and things like that, configuring, I would say, soundboards and mics and screens and things like that to basically put on like educational events, typically business related things, industry related things. So like conferences. That's why I say it's more of an educational nature. And within that space, sitting down and working with hardware and dealing with a lot of like technical issues, those were things that made me stop and, just say, oh, wow, like I actually really enjoy this job. I really enjoy doing this kind of work. I really enjoy sitting down and figuring out the intricacies as far as like hardware issues, why people are having these kind of, I would say, problems or even smaller malfunctions that arose simply because of the hardware we received at times. And it made me stop. And as I learned more about the role, I realized like what I had to learn was limited due to the requirements of where I was as far as what that location offered. And it made me say, there's so much more to what I'm doing. And in reference to where I am, I would like to be able to experience, I would say, this role or this technical role in all the fashions that are possible, or to see, where I could actually go with this because, setting up events is nice and everything, but the most important part to me was having a team where I felt comfortable that I'm working with people who care in all facets of what we're doing. I'm working with people who are competent, people who are actually interested in, I would say, not only teaching, but at the same time being willing to be taught of different methods and ideologies. And most importantly, I was just interested in really learning everything it was that I can as far as the role that I was doing at the time. And I got to work with a lot of different equipment. I got to work with, I would say, a lot of different people, see a lot of different industries, and learn quite a bit about different industries from, government to real estate, um, engineering, and the list goes on and on and on. But the focal point of what this experience has led me to is that, I've really enjoyed just learning about technology. Yeah, I grew up with a very technical father. He really enjoyed his like trinkets and phones and things like that. Me and my brother ended up being super interested in computers. I'm more of an Apple person though. You know what I'm saying? But I'm still interested in building my own PC. I would love to get my hands on a cheese grater, and then like play with that and whatnot. But it's those little things that made me stop and say, oh, well, as far as like an actual job, I'm looking at IT, technology, and through this time of unemployment, I've sat down and I've just continued to look for roles, right? Um, I had a friend who was like assisting me. We would talk about like my methodologies and my approaches and what it was that I was doing within my process. And we talked about a lot of things that were ineffective, things that made sense. She looked over my resume and told me it looks good. But at the same time, we have a different set of skills as we're not interested in doing the same thing. And I'm making this video right now mainly because it's just been a long process. It's been a difficult process, quite frankly. Um, for 8 months, I've sat down and I've pivoted left, I've pivoted right, I've pivoted up, and I've pivoted down, and I'm just at this point of just being tired. It just seems like there's nothing that's happening that's leading me to anything effective, right? The biggest thing is I've been sitting here making these YouTube videos and they have not been consistent, and I appreciate everyone who watches them. Um, I do have like another channel where I'm like just uploading gameplay and stuff like that. Those are much more consistent. I drop like a video a week. Sometimes I'm still working on like my methodology of how that release schedule looks, but I sit down and I do this because it really just helps me, I would say, come to terms with where I am, like just being able to make things and do things outside of my job at this moment in time. It made me stop, and it all originally initiated a couple of years ago when I came to the conclusion, like, hey, working is fine and all that, but it's kind of difficult to sit down and have a job, and what you do at the job can only be done at the job, and there's really nothing else you could really do once you clock out, which really made me stop and reanalyze how I approached how I work and what kind of work that I would like to do. To me, it didn't really make sense that I have to sit down and clock in for 8 hours a day, but once I leave, I can't really utilize these skills unless somebody else is willing to say, you could be my employee. So that was one of the main reasons that led me, I would say, into the field of where I am today. I've always been interested in technology. I kind of got that from my dad. And, right now, I do sell consoles and stuff. So basically, I like to play with these mini computers. I don't hack them or anything right now, mainly because I got some other stuff that I'm trying to do first before I buy like my own personal series of consoles. I'm not trying to have like 10 damn Wii's and like 5 fucking PlayStation 5s and stuff like that right now, since I'm unemployed, right? But it's smaller things like that that have led me to this point of really looking at unemployment, looking at myself and saying, what do I really think makes the most sense for me going forward? And what do I really want to do going forward? We always talk about careers and college and whatnot. I'll be honest, I would still advise people to go to college. But go to college to do something that you want to do or do something that you want to learn, but understand that you don't go to college to get a job. You know what I'm saying? To me, I never thought that made sense, which is why I went to college to learn music, right? And as far as my field is concerned, it's purely project-based. You know what I mean? But if you want to sit down and go to college to get a job, that's a different perspective that I'm not the right person to be able to give. And, in this environment, this climate, this economy, people care more about skills as opposed to paper. I was taught to value the paper and that people will value the paper, but realistically, I never gave a shit about the paper. And I'm glad that I had that perspective, because that's what my world has become. It doesn't mean that college isn't valuable. It's just an employer is not going to value the fact that you know something versus somebody who actually knows something and has done something and can prove that.
Better make sure he's actually dead next time. That was dangerous.
And that's why I sit down and say, spend your time really working towards your skill set. Spend your time working towards putting things out there. Well, for me, I coined the concept for myself, the living resume. I'm not sure if this is a universal thing, if someone's already come up with this, but that's kind of why I put myself in a position of making the YouTube videos that you see today, right? Like, if someone wants to stop and talk to me about a job as far as editing videos. I have videos to show that I've edited things. I have videos to show that I've done some kind of audio work, but I'm not like, I would say, who could I think of? Who I'll say like Corey Kenshin, Markiplier, Phil DeFranco. I'm not one of these type of creators who has someone who has heavy video editing skills. I was really thinking of the gentleman who has edited for Logan Paul, because I would sit down and watch some of his YouTube videos about how to become like a better video editor and things like that. And that's really the thing, right? Like, I'm making this video because I've just recognized when it comes to doing things that you want, you need to put yourself out there. Even though this is a bit wrapped up in unemployment, in jobs, and skills, I figured for myself, it all ties in, right? Like, when I began video editing, I was really interested because I was watching YouTube videos in like 2016. I would watch someone, mainly like Leafy's here, honestly making satirical videos, or really shit posting, better said. Less satire and more, at this point, you could claim bullying, quote unquote, bullying. I would say heavy criticism pieces that leaned less so on satire and did end up into that like semi-harassment territory. As time went on, obviously it wasn't originally that way, but I sit down and I say this because those were like the first videos I would sit down and just watch on YouTube outside of like video games and stuff. And it was that time frame around like late high school for me, where I was really doing a lot of like music stuff. I was really interested in editing videos. And ironically, at the end of my college track, I was in, it was audio recordings. It was basically like the fourth stage of the class. I can't remember the exact name of it. But effectively, we had to use Pro Tools and we had to make like a video. And that really re-sparked my desire of like making videos, you know. And when I stopped and I was like, I want to go to college for music, I understood back then, like, oh, I could go to school and do music and I'm not forced to sit down and have to become the next engineer or Metro Boomin or Murder Beats, you know, to get this Grammy nominated record. I could sit down and I could do syncs. I could sit down and I could do commercials and stuff like that. And I recognized back then, like, I had a lot of opportunities as far as what it is I actually wanted to achieve and what I could achieve. And now that I'm sitting down and seeing where I am, I'm like, you know, I still built that skill set. And at the same time, I'm still making music right now. I'm not really in like the emotional space where I'm making music consistently, mainly due to, as you know, life's events. But it's these things that made me stop and say, you know what? I want to be able to pivot and also find something that I can do outside of the music realm and, you know, be able to bolster my skill set. And when I found this role of, you know, being like an event technician and stuff and learning everything that I learned on the floor, it made me stop and say, yeah, like, I would love to do IT. I would love to understand like how to code, deal with servers. You know, right now my main goal is just being a help desk technician, or like a tier 1 technician, or whatever terminology they want to utilize. But for me, it's just being in this space where I'm able to utilize these skill sets outside of a workplace, right? You know, my main goal right now is, once I could find a way to get situated, I've been thinking about building a VPN for some time. You know what I mean? And I recognize, hey, somebody might want me to build a VPN network for them. You know, it's no different than somebody wanting me to make a song for them. It's no different than somebody wanting me to sit down and, I would say, shit, even building a computer for them, realistically, if they're not technologically savvy. But it's these smaller things that made me stop and say, you know, college does have its value. You know, there are things that you learn in college that a certification can't necessarily teach you depending on what you want to do. So I don't want to sit down and tell people like, hey, college isn't valuable, because I don't feel that way. I personally never wanted to go to college, but I'm glad I did. Because if I didn't go to college and I was someone who just sat on YouTube and tried to learn music theory that way, you know, there's a lot that I would have missed out on. There's a lot of people that I would have not met, you know. I'm actually very happy to have gone to college, knowing that I learned from people who've traveled the world doing music. So I definitely have the same ability to be as successful, if not more successful than my predecessors. Um, and that's kind of the main thing of just dealing with this space right now of unemployment. You know, just because I'm in a bad position right now doesn't mean that I won't be able to be successful. I just have to sit down and continue going through the steps, and doing my best to be patient. You know, doing my best to still make videos like this, you know, because maybe I might not get a traditional job. Maybe I might end up being an editor for somebody who does YouTube videos or has a YouTube channel. I'll be 100% honest. I don't think my skill set at this moment in time really reflects that, but it doesn't mean that it's outside the realm of possibility. I definitely do believe, hey, I may need some more time. If I can sit down and like actually edit someone's videos, and that might be like something that I can do on the side, right? But it's all of these smaller things that eventually build up in your life that can lead you to finding success in ways that you don't necessarily perceive it. The most difficult part about this time frame, I would say for me, is just, I would say, being confident. And I don't mean being confident in the aspect of my abilities or whether I can or can't, but just being confident that something is going to work out for me, even though I feel like the clock is definitely ticking down, you know. I've sat down and I put myself in a position where I was looking at, I would say, my funds for a situation like this. Unfortunately, I've always had this mindset of preparing for the worst. And I mean literally preparing for the worst. But at the same time, preparing for the worst and looking to put myself in the best position possible has led me to a situation where, yeah, you know, I've been unemployed for 8 months. My unemployment ran up. But I'm in a position where, you know, financially, I don't really have to kill over or jump into gig work to be able to make ends meet. Don't get me wrong. Jumping into gig work is still a good idea to not necessarily run through your savings. So if you're someone who's in this similar position, I would still advise it. I just don't have a car to be able to do gig work like that. I would have if I did, but you know, that's a different story for maybe a different version of myself, right? But either way, it's one of those things where I put myself in a position to be successful if worse came to worse. And I'm thankful that I don't necessarily have to be sitting down scratching for a couple of dollars and some change. But at the same time, if you are someone who's in that position, I advise you to do what you can to make the best out of your situation. And hopefully you get a job and get back on your feet soon. You know, this is an economy where a lot of people have been struggling. I've been watching the video game industry, right? I've seen people be laid off for the last 2 years now. It's really more, yeah, we could say 2 years. I wasn't too deep as far as like watching layoffs in 2023. The layoffs kind of started, I'd say late 2023, but 2024 is a really tough year to sit down and basically read a new article or listen to a new video and hear thousands of people lose their jobs. Workforce is being reduced. You know, I even listened to a video about Intel reducing their workforce by like 20% in the next coming month. And even that's not related to video games, it's related to chips. So that's computers, electronics, And I don't know what kind of where all of Intel's chip goes, because I do know that they mainly focus on computers, but it's just to be able to stop and see that there's so many people who are now in a position of having to start over, or they'll soon be in a position to start over. It's disheartening, and especially being someone who sat here for 8 months, put in application after application after application. And I'll be honest, I've actually stopped putting in as many applications, because originally I was putting in like, I would say 50 a week when I started, and now I'm doing, I would say, within the range of like 25, well, 20 to like 30. Yeah, 25, 20 to 30 would be a good range. So it's just one of those things where, you keep putting your best foot forward, and you keep trying, and that's all you can do. I sit down and I really make this video, I would say, more so to be able to not only give myself a bit of clarity, but at the same time being able to encourage people. It's hard, but you have to keep going. I had a friend who recently told me, like, the only thing that I can do for her is tell her that, when I have an interview and things like that, and I stopped and thought to myself, you want me to be able to tell you something positive for myself, but that's still out of my control. As I'm looking to do like little things that I can to help and make her life a bit easier, as she's sitting down and making my life a bit easier. And it made me, I felt a few different ways about that, but it made me stop and say, you know what, I'm gonna face the situation that I'm going into right now with more confidence. It's not ideal, but I'm in the phase of, I'm running out of time in my perspective, but the only thing I can do is continue to put my best foot forward and keep going. So I just want to say, if you're still in this same situation, keep doing your best. Put your best foot forward and keep going. It's hard, quite frankly. I really don't understand why companies are able to operate this way. But at the same time, it's kind of just where the world is. So, I guess. But with that being said, I hope whatever it is that you're experiencing in life, you're able to see the bright side. And if you do have a job, keep working hard, keep doing your best, but at the same time, set yourself up for success. Determine what you want to do, whether this is like a temporary role, whether this is your dream job. Sit down and see, okay, this may be my dream job, but at the end of the day, I still have more life to this. I still have more life in me than maybe the life of this job. Honestly, if you could have that job for life, that's perfect. That's honest. I said honest, LOL. That's great for you, and most importantly, I commend you and I'm proud of you. But other than that, keep doing your best. And with that being said, my name is Lamb. I will catch you in the next one, and I hope I can bring you a more interesting video about me not being jobless. Have a good one.